Sarah Delaney, 27, had always been drawn to unexplained phenomena. As a travel photographer and aspiring documentary filmmaker, she thrived on the strange and the unknown. So when she read about the mysterious Marfa Lights, a recurring phenomenon seen in the desert skies near the remote town of Marfa, Texas, she booked her trip without hesitation. She arrived in Marfa on a quiet Wednesday afternoon in late October, the air crisp and dry, the kind that carried secrets between its windswept gusts. The town was small, quiet to the point of eerie. A few art galleries lined the dusty main street, their windows reflecting the empty blue sky. The locals she passed didn't smile much. They looked tired, with dark circles under their eyes, as though sleep was a rare luxury. She checked into the old Hotel Paisano, a historic building known for its vintage charm. As she entered the ornate lobby, the staff greeted her with robotic politeness. The air inside the hotel was colder than expected, even though the heater hummed softly from the vents. Her room on the 3rd floor faced the desert. After unpacking her gear, tripod, DSLR, lenses, Sarah sat by the window, waiting for dusk. The Marfa Lights weren't guaranteed, but she had done her research. They usually appeared shortly after sundown, floating or darting above the horizon, with colors ranging from red to white to bluish green. Some claimed they were reflections, others alien visitors. A few whispered of ghost lanterns from long-dead miners or Apache spirits. That evening, she drove to the official Marfa Lights viewing area on Route 90, parked, and waited with a few tourists. Cameras clicked in the dark. Murmurs rose when someone thought they saw something. And then, there they were. 3 orbs of light floated silently above the brush, glowing softly, weaving in and out of one another like fireflies, dancing to a song no one else could hear. One of the tourists gasped. Sarah's fingers trembled as she adjusted her camera. She snapped photos, switched to video mode, then simply watched, awestruck. But then something strange happened. The lights stopped moving. They hovered, still and silent. Then one light suddenly pulsed brighter, as if staring directly at her. She blinked. The hair on her arms rose. The camera in her hand flickered and died. She stared at the dead battery icon, confused. The battery had been at 80%. Then came the noise. A whisper. It didn't come from the crowd or the wind. It came from behind her. "Go back." She turned. No one was there. "Go back, Nout, before the light finds you." She stood frozen. The air around her had grown heavy. She packed up quickly, making her way back to her car with the rising dread that something was terribly wrong. She spent the night tossing in her hotel bed, the whisper replaying over and over in her head. She thought about leaving, going back to Austin, pretending she never saw anything. But the curiosity was stronger. In the morning, she opened her laptop, looked over the few images that had saved before the battery died. One photo chilled her to the core. Among the floating lights was a silhouette, something tall, humanoid, but with arms too long and limbs bent in ways that defied anatomy. She zoomed in. Its face was white, no features, just a blank, round surface glowing faintly, like a skull made of light. She closed the laptop and exhaled, panic rising. She needed answers, but something told her that Marfa would not give them freely. It would make her earn them, and it had already started watching. The next morning, Sarah wandered into a small coffee shop just off the main road. She hoped caffeine would clear her mind, and logic would dissolve the unease she felt. But the air inside the cafe was just as heavy as the silence between the handful of patrons. They sat, sipping slowly, eyes sunken. A man in his 70s stood behind the counter. His name tag read, Ray. "Black coffee, please," Sarah said. Ray poured her a cup without a word. As he handed it to her, He paused and stared, his gaze fixed not on her, but just past her shoulder. You went out to see them, didn't you? Sarah's hand trembled around the cup. The lights? She asked, trying to sound casual. Ray nodded slowly. They saw you then. Is that bad? Ray leaned in. Not all who see them are chosen, but if they see you, really see you, they don't let go. He said nothing more, retreating to the kitchen. Sarah sat, confused and deeply unsettled. She opened her camera bag to review her photos again, hoping she had imagined the silhouette. But the image had changed. What was once a distant, faceless shape was now closer, clearer. Its limbs were more defined, and its blank face was no longer blank. A wide, gaping mouth was visible, no eyes, just a void of blackness where its mouth stretched open, far beyond human anatomy. She shut the laptop. Her coffee went cold. Outside, the wind picked up, the kind of wind that didn't rustle trees, but instead felt like breath brushing against your skin. She heard it again. Whispers. Sarah. Her name. Clear. She turned sharply, but the street was empty. Just dust blowing across cracked pavement. She returned to her hotel room, locked the door, and turned on the TV. Static. She flipped the channels, each one the same. Just snow. Then, on Channel 8, an image appeared. Not a broadcast, a video of her. Standing at the Marfa Lights platform, staring into the dark. The footage was from behind her, though she had been alone. In the video, the lights appeared as they had the night before. But then, the figure behind her moved, its long fingers curled, reaching toward her shoulder. She gasped and turned to her real shoulder. Nothing. The TV cut to black. Then, a voice, slow and cold, spoke from the speaker. "Don't run, Sarah. We already live inside you now." Terror bloomed in her chest. She grabbed her things and rushed to the lobby. "Something's wrong with the television in my room," she told the desk clerk. The young man barely looked up. "They say the lights sometimes follow visitors back to their rooms," he said flatly. "Don't turn on the TV." Sarah stared. "Are you serious?" He nodded once. "I'd leave if I were you." But it was already too late. She could feel it. Whatever watched her that night, whatever followed, was now closer than ever. The following morning, Sarah visited the Marfa Public Library. She was done waiting. She needed answers. The librarian, an elderly woman named Marta, gave her a hesitant look when she asked for information about local legends. "You're not the first to come looking," Marta said, "but you might be the first they've taken an interest in." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Who are they?" Marta sighed, then pulled out a worn box labeled Local Folklore, Unpublished. Inside were faded pages, handwritten notes, and newspaper clippings dating back nearly a century. One article from 1948 described a group of hikers who vanished after seeing strange lights. Another from 1971 told of a child who returned from the desert, mute and terrified, drawing the same blank-faced figure over and over. Sarah turned to a page scrawled in ink that had bled over time. At the top was the name, The Faceless Watcher. The entry read, "They say he was a man once. A settler who trespassed on sacred Apache lands. For defiling a burial site, he was cursed, not with death, but with eternal silence and blindness, so that he could neither see nor speak, only observe and remember. Over generations, the curse twisted his form, until he was only shadow, with a face that reflected back the emptiness of his soul. He roams the desert now, drawn to those who disrespect the land or stare too long into the light." Sarah felt the room grow colder. "I saw him," she whispered. Marta's face paled. "Then he saw you?" Sarah asked if there was a way to break the connection. Marta hesitated. "There's an old story," she said. "They say if you find where he was cursed and speak his name before the sun sets on the third day, he'll release you. But no one remembers the name, and no one who's searched has ever come back." Sarah left the library shaken. She had 2 days left, if the legend was true. That night, she didn't sleep, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, standing in the desert. Closer. Each time, closer. On the morning of the second day, Sarah rented a jeep and headed out into the desert, following coordinates scribbled on the edge of one of the pages. According to the notes, there was a circle of stones where the Watcher's transformation began. Hours passed. The heat, though mild for October, pressed down on her like a weight. The land stretched endlessly, flat, silent, haunted. Then she found it, a ring of black stones scorched into the dirt, forming a perfect circle. No plants grew inside. No sound existed there, not even wind. She stepped inside. The air changed. Something moved at the edge of her vision. Then a voice, not whispered, not screamed, but spoken, cut through the silence. "Sarah." She turned and saw him. The Watcher. He was no longer distant or blurry. His towering form stood 10 feet tall, his limbs long and insect-like, his face still blank but vibrating, like something just beneath the surface was trying to come through. She stepped back. "Why me?" she shouted. "You saw too much," he replied, though his mouth didn't move. The voice echoed from within her mind. "You brought the lens. You captured what was meant to remain hidden." "I didn't know!" she cried. "There is no forgiveness, only choice. Stay, or release." Sarah remembered Marta's words. "If I find where he was cursed, and say his name before the third sunset." "What is your name?" she screamed. The Watcher stood silent. "Who were you?" The ground inside the stone circle began to rumble. Sarah fell to her knees, hands pressed to the dirt. And then, in a sudden gust of wind, she heard it. "Elijah." A name. A whisper. She stood, turned to the setting sun and shouted, "Elijah! Elijah Marston! I release you!" The wind stopped. Silence fell. The Watcher stared. And then, he crumbled into dust. Gone. Sarah returned to town that evening, exhausted. But something had shifted. The weight in the air had lifted. The hotel felt warmer. The staff even smiled faintly. She opened her laptop. The images were gone. All of them, except one. The final picture, taken at the moment the lights appeared, remained. She zoomed in. No Watcher, no silhouette, just the lights. Beautiful, silent, still. She exhaled deeply. Maybe it was over. But as she packed, preparing to leave, she found a note slipped under her door. Plain white paper. One word. Watcher. She turned to the mirror. Behind her, in the reflection, he was back. Sarah never left Marfa. At least, not completely. She was found days later, wandering the desert, dehydrated, speaking nonsense. Locals said she'd become one of the touched. Some say she stares at the lights every night from the same roadside platform, whispering to herself. Others avoid her. Because now, she doesn't have a face in photographs. Tourists who take her picture return home to find the image blank, or worse, distorted with strange shadows behind her. They say if you stare too long into the Marfa lights, the Watcher might see you too. And once he sees you, you start to see him in everything. Galveston, Texas, known for its rich history and coastal charm, had a darker side. Sarah, a paranormal investigator, had always been drawn to tales of haunted places. But nothing prepared her for the tale of the mansion that stood on the cliffs, known only as the old Parker House. The house had been abandoned for over 70 years, its grand facade slowly crumbling, and its tall windows blacked out from years of neglect. Rumors spread like wildfire through the small town that strange noises echoed from the mansion late at night, and that anyone who dared set foot inside would never return the same. Sarah had heard the stories before. Most were exaggerated, fueled by superstition. But the idea of exploring such a mysterious place was irresistible. The town locals warned her to stay away, but Sarah was not one to back down. With her camera and recording equipment packed, she set out on a brisk October evening, the salty sea breeze tangling in her hair as she made her way towards the mansion. As Sarah arrived at the edge of the property, she could feel the temperature drop, a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The mansion loomed like a dark sentinel over the coast. It looked as though it had once been a place of wealth and elegance, but time had worn it down, leaving behind only an eerie skeleton. She stepped through the iron gates, which creaked ominously as they swung open. As she crossed the threshold, the air seemed to thicken, like the house was breathing around her. It was an unsettling sensation that made her pause for a moment. The floorboards groaned underfoot as she walked deeper into the house. The scent of old wood and dust filled her nostrils, mingling with the unmistakable odor of decay. The further she ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Her camera blinked to life, recording every step. Suddenly she heard it. A low whisper, so faint it was almost inaudible, but it was there. "Leave now." Sarah froze. She turned quickly, but there was no one behind her, just empty rooms and broken furniture. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaky. No response, only the distant creaking of the house settling. She continued her exploration, her heart pounding in her chest. As she passed by the grand staircase, a door on the second floor slammed open, as though inviting her to come closer. Something pulled at her, compelling her to investigate. Against her better judgment, she climbed the staircase and made her way down the long corridor. The door she had seen open stood ajar. As she entered, she was greeted by a dusty room, its walls lined with faded portraits of long-dead ancestors. The eyes of the paintings seemed to follow her every movement. But the strange thing was, they all seemed to be weeping. Her camera flickered as she zoomed in on the portraits. Something wasn't right. She leaned closer and caught a glimpse of a shadow moving in the reflection of the glass. She turned abruptly. Nothing. She shook her head, trying to brush off the unease building in her chest. But that's when she heard it again. A child's laughter. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She grabbed her flashlight and swung it toward the source of the sound, only to find the hallway empty. Something wasn't just haunting this house. It was alive. Sarah's nerves were taut. She was used to encountering eerie sounds during her investigations, but this was different. This was real, undeniable. She could feel it in her bones. Something was watching her, something more than just the echoes of time. The laughter echoed through the halls again, clearer this time, followed by the sound of light footsteps running across the wooden floor. A child's laugh, high-pitched and full of playfulness, as if taunting her. "Hello?" Sarah called, her voice trembling as she moved cautiously through the hallway. She followed the sound to a large, ornate door at the end of the corridor. It was slightly ajar, and a faint light flickered within. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open, her camera poised. Inside was a nursery. The room was pristine, untouched by time, though it had clearly not been used in decades. A crib sat in the corner, its white curtains gently swaying. despite there being no breeze. The walls were painted a soft blue, adorned with stuffed animals and framed nursery rhymes. On the floor lay a doll, a porcelain figure, its eyes wide and unblinking. The laughter stopped. Sarah's pulse quickened as she stepped into the room. As she moved closer to the crib, she heard the soft rustling of fabric. A shape moved in the corner of her eye. She spun around, flashlight in hand, but the room was empty. The doll on the floor was now upright, its once innocent face twisted in a grotesque, mocking smile. Her breath caught in her throat. She leaned down to pick up the doll, but just as her fingers touched the cold porcelain, the door slammed shut behind her. Heart racing, she turned to find a figure standing in the doorway. A child, no older than 5 or 6, with wild, tangled hair and pale skin. Its eyes were completely black. No pupils, no whites, just endless darkness. It smiled, but it wasn't a smile that belonged on a child's face. It was a wicked, knowing grin, full of malice. "Leave," the child whispered. Its voice was raspy and hollow, as though it had been speaking for centuries. And then, with a sudden, chilling cry, the child lunged forward. Sarah was paralyzed with fear. The child's eyes, dark, soulless, seemed to pierce right through her, as though it could see into her very soul. She had never encountered anything like this before. No amount of research or preparation could have prepared her for what she was facing in the old Parker house. The child's smile grew wider, its lips curling unnaturally. It took a step forward, its small feet silent on the floor, and with each step, Sarah could feel the temperature in the room plummet. The air around her grew thick, suffocating. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and writhe, as though they were alive. "Why are you here?" the child asked, its voice now a low, menacing whisper that echoed in Sarah's ears. "Why do you disturb us?" She tried to move, to back away, but her legs refused to obey. She could feel the weight of the room pressing down on her, the walls closing in. The child reached out, its hand cold and clammy, its fingers like claws, and Sarah barely managed to stumble back in time to avoid its grasp. The doll on the floor suddenly sprang to life, its once stiff limbs twitching as though controlled by some unseen force. It sat up, its eyes still locked on Sarah, and then, as if commanded, began to crawl toward her with jerky, unnatural movements. The laughter echoed again, only this time it was not just one child's voice. It was a chorus of children, their laughter growing louder and more sinister with each passing second. Sarah's heart raced. She had to get out. But how? The door she had come through was now locked, and the windows were sealed shut. There was no way out. The mansion had trapped her. In a panic, she turned and sprinted down the hallway, her footsteps echoing through the house. But no matter how fast she ran, the shadows seemed to be getting closer, reaching out to grab her. The house was alive, alive with the spirits of the children who had once lived there, and now it wanted her. She heard the sound of footsteps behind her, but when she turned, no one was there. The walls seemed to close in on her as she ran faster, her breath ragged in her chest. Then she saw it. The grand staircase leading down to the main floor. She bolted toward it, but as she descended, the staircase began to distort, the steps elongating and twisting into impossible shapes. It was as though the house was bending reality, trapping her in a nightmare that wouldn't end. Just when she thought she couldn't take it any longer, she reached the bottom and stumbled into the front foyer. The door, the only way out, was wide open, but standing in the threshold was the child, its dark eyes staring into hers. "Leave now," the child whispered again, its voice a twisted hiss that made Sarah's blood run cold. With a final burst of adrenaline, Sarah bolted for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't look back. She didn't dare to. She could feel the child's presence following her, just beyond her reach, as she ran out into the night. The moment she stepped outside, the temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive weight of the mansion lifted from her shoulders. The wind had died down, and the only sound left was the distant crashing of the waves against the shore. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the horror of what she had just experienced lingered in her mind. She had barely escaped with her life. Sarah never returned to the mansion again. The memory of the haunted house on the cliffs haunted her for years, and she knew that whatever had been waiting inside that house, whatever had trapped those children there, was still there, waiting for the next victim to come across its path. The nightmare didn't end the moment Sarah left the mansion. Her mind refused to let go of the horrors she had witnessed. For weeks after the incident, she found herself waking up in a cold sweat, hearing the child's laugh echo in her ears, feeling its cold hand brush against her skin. Sarah's once confident demeanor had cracked. She couldn't bring herself to investigate other haunted locations. The mansion had left its mark on her, far deeper than she had ever anticipated. She tried to push the memories aside, but they clung to her like a shadow that she could never shake off. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, watching the footage she had captured at the mansion, something caught her eye. The camera had captured more than just the haunting images of the house. There, in the corner of the frame, was a figure that hadn't been there when she had first walked through the room. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and lifeless. She was standing just behind Sarah in one of the shots, her mouth open in a silent scream. The footage was impossible to explain. It was as though the woman had been following her the entire time, watching from the shadows. Sarah felt a cold sweat break out across her brow as she realized the true horror of the mansion. The spirits of the house didn't just want her gone. They wanted her to stay. Sarah's investigation into the haunted mansion had begun as a routine paranormal case, but it had turned into something far darker. She soon realized that the mansion had its own malevolent presence, something that couldn't be easily explained by the living or the dead. Over the following months, Sarah researched the history of the Parker house. She discovered that the mansion had once been the home of a wealthy family, the Parkers, who had fallen into ruin after a tragic event. Their young children had died in an unexplained fire, and the house had been abandoned shortly after. Rumors spread that the house had been cursed, that the souls of the children had never left. But it wasn't just the children's spirits that lingered. There was something else, something far darker, waiting to claim anyone who dared step inside. Sarah came to the chilling realization that the house itself was a living entity, feeding off the fear and despair of those who entered it. She returned to the mansion one last time, determined to confront whatever evil resided there. But as soon as she set foot on the property, she felt it, the oppressive weight of the house closing in around her. This time, there were no whispers. There was no laughter. There was only silence, the kind of silence that made her skin crawl, the silence that told her something was watching, waiting. She made her way to the nursery once more, the place where everything had started. And there, in the corner of the room, she saw it again. The woman in the gown, her face twisted in anguish. "Leave," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible but full of sorrow. "They won't stop until you do." Sarah left the mansion one last time, but the memories of what she had witnessed lingered. She never returned to Galveston, nor did she attempt another investigation of a haunted house. The curse of the Parker house had followed her in ways she couldn't understand. Years later, she would warn others about the dangers of the mansion. The old Parker house still stands, a decaying relic of the past, its windows dark and lifeless, waiting for the next curious soul to cross its threshold. But for those who knew the truth, the mansion would forever remain a place of pure terror. They say there's a stretch of highway deep in South Texas, Route 281, that you should never drive alone at night. Locals whisper about strange lights, vanished travelers, and something that walks upright along the roadside, taller than any man, blacker than the night, with eyes that shine red in the moonlight. Truckers avoid it after dark. Ranchers cross themselves when they drive past the brushland. And if you're unfortunate enough to break down out there, well, they say the desert keeps what it wants. Jesse Martinez didn't believe in legends, at least not anymore. He had grown up hearing stories about La Lechuza, El Silbón, and the devil dogs of the south border towns. But now he was 29, hardened by war, a proud ex-Marine with PTSD, a prosthetic knee, and more nightmares than he cared to admit. Legends were for campfires and scared children, not for grown men with more scars than faith. That night, Jesse had just finished a double shift on a pipeline job west of McAllen. The August heat had baked the dirt into cracked clay, and even the rattlesnakes were too tired to move. He was exhausted, drenched in sweat and oil, and all he wanted was a cold bear, a hot shower, and to sleep for 12 hours straight. He took Route 281 because it was faster, or so he thought. It was just after 11 p.m. when his headlights cut across the scrubland. The two-lane road was empty. Dust whipped across the blacktop in long, ghostly tendrils. Mesquite trees stood like twisted scarecrows on either side. The night was quiet until it wasn't. That's when he saw the girl. She appeared in his high beams like a mirage, standing dead center in the road. Long black hair, bare feet, white dress fluttering in the wind. No car, no lights, just her. Jesse slammed on the brakes. The truck fishtailed and skidded to a stop, tires screaming. He cursed, his heart thudding against his ribs. But when he looked again, the road was empty. What the hell? He opened the door, stepped into the heat-soaked night, and scanned the dark. Nothing. No girl, no footprints, no rustle of bushes, just the endless chirping of crickets and the lonely sigh of the wind. Jesse stood there, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his spine. Then he heard it, a low humming sound, like singing, faint, feminine, coming from the brush to the right. "Hello?" he called out, hand instinctively going to the old knife on his belt. "You okay?" The humming stopped. Silence. Then a whisper. "Too close." "I see you." He spun around. No one. Adrenaline surged. He backed toward the truck. Whatever this was, he wanted no part of it. But the door wouldn't open. The keys were still inside. He looked through the window, saw the gear stick shift on its own, into drive. The truck started to roll. "No, no!" He pounded the door, trying to open it. The engine roared and the headlights flared bright white. The steering wheel jerked left, then right. It was moving on its own. Faster. The truck veered off the road, crashed into a thorn bush, and stalled. Jesse stood alone on the highway, breathing hard. In the moonlight, he saw something far worse. A set of large hoof prints in the dirt behind him. Fresh, and not made by any cow or deer. Two-toed, deep, heavy. "Not possible," he whispered. Then came the whisper again, closer this time and from behind him. "Do you remember me, Jesse?" He turned and saw her. Not the girl this time, but her eyes. Red, burning, floating in the dark. After his harrowing encounter on Route 281, Jesse Martinez tried to resume his life. He moved to Austin, started a new job, and attempted to forget the terrifying figure with antlers and glowing red eyes. But the nightmares persisted. Every night, he would wake up drenched in sweat, the whispers echoing in his ears. "I see you." Determined to find answers, Jesse began researching local legends and folklore. He discovered that Route 281 had a dark history, with numerous reports of unexplained disappearances and sightings of a horned entity. Locals referred to it as El Diablo del Sur, the Devil of the South. Desperate for closure, Jesse decided to confront his fears. He returned to the stretch of Route 281 where the incident occurred, armed with a camera and a voice recorder. As he walked along the desolate road, the air grew thick and the temperature dropped. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "You came back." Jesse turned, and there it was, the horned figure emerging from the shadows. But this time, it spoke. "You cannot escape me, Jesse. You belong to the road now." Jesse's encounter left him shaken. He sought help from a local historian, Maria Alvarez, who specialized in Texan folklore. Maria revealed that the horned entity was believed to be the spirit of a Spanish conquistador who had committed atrocities against indigenous tribes. Cursed by a shaman, his spirit was doomed to wander the land, seeking vengeance. Together, Jesse and Maria delved deeper into the legend, uncovering ancient texts and testimonies. They learned that the entity could be banished by performing a ritual at the site of its origin, using artifacts from the time of the curse. Determined to end the nightmare, Jesse and Maria gathered the necessary items and prepared for the ritual. But as they set up at the cursed site, the ground trembled and the air grew thick with malevolence. The horned figure appeared, more terrifying than ever. "You dare challenge me?" it roared. Jesse stood firm, chanting the incantation. The entity screamed, its form flickering before dissipating into the night. With the entity banished, Jesse felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. He resumed his life, and the nightmares ceased. But Maria warned him that such spirits are never truly gone. They merely lie dormant. Months passed, and strange occurrences began anew. Animals acted erratically, shadows moved without cause, and whispers returned, now heard by others. Maria theorized that the ritual had only weakened the entity, not destroyed it. Determined to end it once and for all, Jesse and Maria sought the help of a shaman, who revealed that the entity's power was tied to a bloodline, Jesse's own ancestors. To sever the connection, Jesse would need to confront the entity in the spirit realm. Guided by the shaman, Jesse entered a trance, his spirit transported to a desolate, otherworldly version of Route 281. The landscape was twisted, with the road stretching endlessly into darkness. The horned entity awaited him. "You cannot defeat me here," it taunted. But Jesse, armed with ancestral knowledge and inner strength, stood his ground. He invoked the spirits of his ancestors, who appeared beside him, their presence empowering him. Together, they confronted the entity, their combined force overwhelming it. With a final scream, the entity shattered, its essence dissipating into the void. Jesse awoke from the trance, exhausted but free. The oppressive presence was gone, and peace returned to the land. He thanked Maria and the shaman for their help, grateful for the second chance at life. Years later, Jesse became a storyteller, sharing his experiences to warn others of the dangers lurking in forgotten places. Route 281 remained, but its darkness had lifted, replaced by a sense of serenity. But sometimes, on quiet nights, travelers report seeing a lone figure walking along the road, a reminder that some legends never die.